Well, thank you so much for staying with us. Well, that's what we're talking about right now, 2023 elections. Well, as the campaigns for the 2023 polls gather momentum, some of the leading presidential candidates are breaking down their manifestos and detailing steps they would take to revive the ailing economy. The presidential candidate of the APC, Asiwaju Ahmed Bola Tinubu, says if he is elected president, he will need the cooperation and support of the private sector to implement his own reforms. Now, in his economic master plan, Senator Tinubu said he would revive industries by bringing Nigeria's industrial policy to life through creation of major and minor industrial hubs in each of the geopolitical zones in the country. He said his administration will actively participate in the digital economy to birth the fourth industrial revolution and target a minimum GDP growth of between 6 and 10%. There are some who are saying that's going to take a miracle. Now, other areas he said he would focus on include agriculture, electricity, and the championing of Buy Made in Nigeria to Grow Nigeria mantra. Let's talk this morning about an aspect of that manifesto that he released in the course of the week. And joining us this morning are Olu Aruolo Veraihen, who is an energy expert. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
As well as Ifeanyi Ajuluchukwu, also in the energy sector, but this time energy infrastructure developer. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
I'm hearing that for the first time, by the way. Energy infrastructure developer. Who is that?
Well, in the typical project cycle, you have a phase which is called the development phase, which is all the feasibility and the checks and all the viability and technical reviews to basically ascertain whether the project is viable for banking. So between concept and bankability, there's a whole process that goes through verifying and checking, and that's what we do.
Well, in this, so actually I should begin with the lady. So I just wanted to, I didn't begin with you, just to be clear. Okay. So, ma'am, let me begin by saying this. Many actually thought that, look, the Tinubu campaign is not for young people. If my eyes are seeing right, and my glasses are not faulty, you look like a young person. Can you debunk or confirm the illusion?
Well, I'll say your glasses are seeing right.
Oh.
That we're, relatively young. The bulk of Nigeria's population is between 18 and 35. And so there is an active and deliberate attempt to make sure that the folks who are contributing to the agenda setting of the future of Nigeria look like the future of Nigeria would be the biggest beneficiaries of that future and the work that's being done today.
Okay. So the challenge then would be, because looking at the 80-page document, and there are those who believe that young people don't like reading, put it on in a tweet, short, straight to the point. But you are here to explain some of these things.
Correct.
So that people can at least begin to understand all of the English put in 80 pages. Where do you want people to even begin to understand from? One major challenge, of course, is energy. We just finished speaking about one of them.
Correct.
And I just added another lexicon, which I'm about to tweet. Chop City. You heard it
I heard that, yes.
Okay.
Well, I think we could start with the biggest catalyst and the biggest income earner for the Nigerian economy, which is the oil and gas sector. Because that cuts through multiple issues, right? Whether we're talking about foreign exchange earnings, which impacts the value of our currency, whether we're talking about fiscal income, which impacts the ability of the government to invest in the various digital, physical, and social infrastructures that are required to move Nigeria forward. It is also going to be that sector that is going to be critical to helping us diversify our economy and our capabilities and industrial launching the industrial policies that you mentioned. So I think for a lot of the folks who are hurting today, we can start with, I think everybody feels the impact of Forex, whether you are buying akara or buying bread or buying toilet paper, because we import a lot of our products in the country at the moment. And so one of the things that the candidates, the Tinubu-Shettima team, have outlined in their policy, in their energy policy, is really how do we make sure we restore our production capacity, our export capacity, to the existing installed nameplate capacity. So they've outlined a plan to grow oil production to 2.6 million barrels per day, and to restore LNG capacity to to the installed 22 million tons per annum. What that means is that you are able to earn enough, government is able to earn enough revenue to defend its currency, keep the currency stable, as well as make the investments that are required in reducing some of the challenges that we've been talking about in your earlier segment.
But that's not to say that the candidates, as you put them, are not aware of the magnitude of oil thefts, which dates back more than 30 years in the country. Redressing that is going to take some political balls, if I can use the term.
That's correct. You're absolutely right. It does go back, as you said, close to 30 years, maybe even more. But it has escalated significantly over the last few years for a number of reasons. And as you said, you need someone who has the political balls or political capital or the political willpower to take on vested interests, to negotiate with the folks who need negotiation in the areas that we've talked about, particularly with crude theft. The two major things there are insecurity, a general issue around insecurity. So what do you do to create an enabling environment so that you can attract investments into that sector? The first thing there is that you make sure, if you look at that manifesto, some of the points that have been outlined, there's a critical infrastructure plan that's been underlined there. And it's mainly to talk about how do you make sure that you invest in technology, update and expand and improve the security apparatus that you have in place. Invest in things like aerial surveillance so that when people are tampering with critical infrastructure, you have that information. And beyond that, you're able to enforce the will of the government to make sure that those assets are always secure. Beyond that, you also make sure that the host communities in which we're operating and where these national assets sit are fully engaged productively in the value chains of the businesses, that whether it's industry or oil and gas, that they're productively engaged and disincentivized to attack some of these assets.
I can imagine why that English word would be quite a problem. But you know what? Along the line of all of these conversations, Mr. Juliushuku, is infrastructure indeed. Down through the ages, all through the years. One major challenge a number of people have discussed is that of our infrastructure deficit, e.g. the refineries. Tremendous, infrastructure investments dating back, how many years now? Almost as old as Nigeria's independence. And here we are. That's my question.
Okay, so you're right. We do have infrastructure deficit. However, there are ways to solve this problem. The candidates, Tinubu-Shettima, have said in the manifesto that we will focus on PPPs, so public-private partnerships, by the government creating the enabling environment for investors to come in and take over this infrastructure that should be left in the public domain. So you see, with refineries, the government has run these refineries as state-owned entities. But if we privatize them, if we create an environment where people can come in and invest right in this sector, then we would, as a country, stop using monies that can be used for other more more pressing infrastructure. So, for example, Aliko Dangote is building a refinery today that can provide for Nigeria. That is a private initiative. If that happens, we would have the volumes to reduce imports and actually export, because Nigerian refineries can do 456,000 barrels of refining capacity. That on its own should take care of us. Then we begin to export the excess. So we have capacity. It's about maintenance and management and sustaining investment to ensure that they keep on going. And
which we don't exactly have a reputation for.
Yes, we don't, right? But this team has a reputation for doing that. So we say Lagos works, and it's a reality. If you create the right environment, you would see...
Does it?
Does Lagos work?
Does it?
We believe so.
Okay.
We believe so. Lagos works. I've lived in Lagos for all of my life. I've lived in Lagos, and cumulatively, 95% of my life is spent in Lagos. Okay. Now, in every environment, there are different the demographics. And I can see some people are not living as... we would like them to live. And the idea is to grow everybody so that the least will be at a level higher than the poverty line. Yes.
Okay, Olu, when you started, you spoke about our largest foreign exchange earner.
Correct.
And I pinched myself. So, okay, we've gone from 2.1 million barrels per day to where are we right now, 900 and something.
Correct.
And we don't see any signs of it improving anytime soon. So we need to begin to look at other areas where Nigeria can make money. And tied to that directly is power. Power supply, so that small industries, I mean, business people always say that the engine room of the economy is the small business people. And once those small business people can go about doing their businesses, then your economy will work. So let's talk about power supply.
Okay.
What are the plans put forward by these candidates to improve power supply in Nigeria?
Okay, thanks for saying that. So it is still related. So power is part of the energy sector, and quite linked to the gas sector, because 80% of our installed generating capacity comes from gas. So we do still need to address the general insecurity problem of crude theft so that you can improve the reliability of generation capacity and then be able to transmit it and then distribute it. So there's no escaping that. That's why as we started there, it is an underlying catalytic sector. There's no way to avoid it. It is your path to the future.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the power sector, there's the distribution. So the electricity tariff that we pay is insufficient to cover the costs of all the investors along the power value chain. So whether you're talking about the person who distributes the power, who needs to make investments in distribution infrastructure and metering, whether you're talking about the entity that is transmitting the power, our grid can only transmit 5 gigawatts of power. We have installed, and most of the time you see all those notes, those WhatsApp messages about the grid has collapsed again. Because whenever you increase your generation capacity, which is close to 16 gigawatts,
Can't take it.
You trip it. And so you need to, and the income that you need, the critical income that you need for that investor within that chain is not sufficient. So they're not collecting enough of it. A lot of it is stolen. We've decided to regulate it at a price that doesn't make any sense. So you do not incentivize investments along the chain. It's not enough. That same tariff is not enough to pay for the cost of the generating companies, right? So you have gas generating companies or hydro generating companies. Hopefully in the near future, you will have solar generating companies, but they need income to be able to attract investments to their part of the value chain so that we have power. So until you address that tariff, which is what has been outlined in the manifesto, which is how do you make sure that that tariff that we're charging to electricity end users, especially those who have high availability, reflects the true cost of power to them.
From what you just said now,
Correct.
Sounds like we have an infrastructure challenge as well.
We do, but
in this power sector.
In every sector you look at, we have an infrastructure gap.
Let's stay here first.
Let's stay here. You do have an infrastructure gap.
Because I mean, you just talked about tripping something.
Yes, the transmission capacity.
We are trying to meet the demands.
Correct.
And then we trip the demand that we have simply because I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
So it does make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you're trying to say is this: if we don't create this distribution infrastructure, so the sector is divided into different parts of the value chain. You generate, you transmit, you distribute to the end user. We have generating capacity of 16 gigawatts
for generation.
Yeah, generation.
Yes.
You can generate power.
Yes.
Yeah.
16 gigawatts.
Okay.
We can transmit the bulk of it. Call it seven.
Five gigawatts.
Transmit.
Five.
No, can transmit
5 gigawatts. 5 gigawatts.
Okay, good.
5 gigawatts.
Yes. Okay.
So you've hit a bottleneck immediately.
Yes.
Yeah. So are we getting clearer now? So once you have 16 gigawatts of generating capacity, the infrastructure to evacuate that generating capacity is only 5. We need investments.
So I need my people need 1,000 oranges.
Yes.
Correct.
I can create 60,000 oranges for them, but I can only move 30.
Correct. There you go. And so you need what? You need investment. And how do you get investment? You need income from customers so that you show a bank that I have enough income to pay you back the money that I'll make to make this investment and pay you back the money you've lent me. And if we don't allow the income to grow, which is the electricity tariff, then we're not able to attract the investments that you need to invest to grow your capacity to move beyond moving 30 oranges.
We need to move along a bit faster. We need to talk about petrol subsidy.
Correct.
Subsidy.
Subsidy, as it's been.
You heard that word as you were coming in, petrol
Yes.
subsidy.
Correct.
So how's that going to happen?
Okay. So
I'll let you find take that.
Okay.
So the word subsidy, or subsidy as we call it, so subsidy is detrimental to investments. Okay, and while from a welfarist point of view, we think it's helping the masses, it's actually limiting growth in all sectors, whether it's power, whether it's oil and gas. So in simple terms, you have to ask yourself, every business person is in business to make money.
Sure.
Every investor has to make returns. We can't get the right investments to produce properly to drive the cost of the per unit cost of petrol to the cheapest portion for the end user if we don't have investments. Look at what happened in telecoms. Initially, it was very expensive. I bought my first SIM card at 30k naira. Today it's free.
I bet you still have that.
I still have that line. Okay, but it was bought for 30,000 naira back then. Okay, today it's free. And this was when 30k was like $50 or something like that. So it's not 30k of today.
Yeah.
Okay, but today it's given up for free. Similarly, if we remove subsidy and channel those monies into other very important infrastructure, right? We will allow the people who understand this business to invest properly and bring down the average cost of production.
That which you are saying, as sensible as it sounds,
Yes.
communicating it to people is going to be a challenge. We've been wanting to do this now for what, 20 years?
So it will be done. Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has said it's gone. Once they resume office, it's gone. And I'll explain to you in simple terms why it's impossible to continue to do this. So 1 barrel of oil today is about $95. The conversion from barrels to liters is 159. So they're 159 liters in a barrel. If you divide 95 by 159, you get about 60 cents. If you multiply it by the parallel market rate of, say, 850, that's 507. So the crude itself that someone's going to buy to refine is 507 naira per liter.
That's his cost.
Cost. Okay? If you did the same with the with the official rate at 432, which is not a real rate because nobody gets that rate. Okay, it is 258. So how can I buy a raw material for 258, put it into an equipment that I spent millions of dollars to invest in, okay, pay staff, then distribute it and sell at 180?
Okay. That conversation, you just suspended the rest of it because we are completely out of time now.
Okay.
Let me believe that this is the first of many conversations we're going to have with you. But we have to thank you very much for being here this morning. Olu Arolo Veraihen. I got it right.
Yes.
Good. I'm going to get an award for that. She's an energy expert, as well as Ifeanyi Chuku, who is an energy infrastructure developer. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this morning. So, this conversation continues, but with another topic when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Okay, so we should be going to... Why are you looking at me like that?
We should be going to Abuja in a bit.
To talk about climate change.
Yes. So this year's UN climate conference takes place in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, against a backdrop of extreme weather events worldwide. It's not only in Nigeria. Also in that backdrop somewhere is an energy crisis propelled by the war in Ukraine and scientific data reiterating that the world is not doing enough to tackle carbon emissions and protect the future of our planet. Well, I did listen about last week or so, complaints about, once again, if we don't look after our planet is going to kill us. And that is not something nice to be saying about our world and our planet. We have a duty to the planet that God has given us, on which we live, but we have a responsibility to keep that planet going so that we can live happily on that planet. So all this is coming a few days after the devastating floods in Nigeria. The UN Secretary General has said that COP27 must deliver a, I quote, down payment on climate solutions that match the scale of the problem. So, will the leaders deliver? In 2015, Nigeria joined the global community in adopting the Paris Agreement, a binding mechanism for all countries in addressing the challenges of climate change. Sadly, some people say that climate change is a hoax, but we are seeing more and more clearly floodings, earthquakes, tornadoes, which were not usual at those particular times of the year, happening. Take our country, Nigeria. Look at the monumental floods that we had in Nigeria last week. Floods in October.
If memory serves me right, when I was growing up, rain stopped sometime in August.
Okay, let's push it. September.
Harmattan starts at about September. That's why it's in August.
Yeah, that's right.
It's about that time that I think we return to school for the third term. So that's the only memory of rains that I had.
You're going back to school with your blanket.
And so when we talk about these things, and we also understand that, you know, the floods are rising because the glaciers are melting.
Yeah.
So I guess we move on now.
There's climate change right there. Well, we have the National Coordinator, Global Environment Facility Small Grant Program, Ronke Olubamishi, who's joining us from our studio in Abuja. Good morning. Mrs. Bamishe, can you hear me?
Morning. Thank you.
Morning. How
Yes,
are you today?
I can hear you. Good morning.
Yes.
Thank you for
COP20.
having me again.
Thank you. COP27. Many Nigerians say that they don't feel that we are part of COP anything. Forget 27.
Well, it depends on the perspective. Thank you again for having me, and it's always a pleasure to be part of your programs and to discuss national and global issues. Thank you for the good work you're doing. So, well, if some Nigerians or many Nigerians think that climate change does not concern them, well, I just wonder from what perspective the person is speaking. Because just like what you were saying a couple of minutes ago, we don't even need scientists to tell us what is happening again about climate change. We have seen extremes of weather patterns. The last time we experienced a flood in this magnitude in Nigeria was in 2012, and I bet you it wasn't as big as this. And so each day and each period, the situation gets worse. And so for somebody to say it doesn't concern them, maybe because of the election that is coming up and people are just bothered about the general economic situation of the country. But to say climate change does not concern us, it's a joke. And like you made mention, you made a statement the other time that if we don't take care of the planet, then the planet will kill us. It's actually not the planet that is killing us. We are the one killing ourselves. So I think it is important for everybody to get in line and everybody to start thinking of what we can do to ensure that we don't kill ourselves in the end.
Perhaps the challenge then is helping people understand exactly the issues we are dealing with. Because when we talk about climate change, maybe it's too much grammar, if I can say it that way. Perhaps the challenge is helping people understand exactly when we talk about climate change, what exactly are we talking about? Just to bring the conversation home to the average Nigerian.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. Climate change is the change in weather pattern. Naturally, we have changes in weather pattern. You were talking about the rainy season, the harmattan, and the dry season, which were natural before. But now we see extreme of some of these weather patterns. And one of the things that I always just used to give example to people is that whereas before in Nigeria, for example, like you were saying, I remember a particular, some years back, I remember one particular woman used to sing and says that I put my clothes on the line for 9 days. It did not get dry until after 9 days. And people knew what will happen. You know what you have in August, in September, in October, as far as weather situations are concerned then. But now you can't even predict. We're just talking about what has been changing in the past. So the environment is changing. You get somewhere now and you see people just fanning themselves. What is happening is because the trees that were supposed to take in the carbon dioxide that we breathe out, they are not there again. All the places where we used to have trees, they are not there again. We have houses, we have industries, we have buildings, we have roads. But we never thought of what were the trees doing for us before. But now we see we don't have the trees again. And so the environment is getting hot. What is happening is that like I said, the CO2 that the trees take in, that we breathe out and the trees take in, the trees are no longer there to take in this CO2. And the CO2 has the capacity to absorb heat. This heat is what we are now feeling in the environment. And that is why we are seeing, and of course, when there is heat, glaciers are melting, there is increase, which of course is increasing the water in the oceans. And then, of course, we have flooding and all that. So these are some of the things that are causing what we can explain as climate change. Thank you for the footage that you have shown. Some of these places were farmlands, and now they're all taken over by flood. People can no longer go to the farm and farm as they used to be. People can no longer even sleep. I remember a particular time they were telling us the temperature in Maiduguri, for example, and people have to pour water on their mattress before they can sleep. So these are some of the things that are our attitude to the environment, the way we consume the natural resources, and we don't give any thought to what will happen. If you cut this tree, what happens thereafter? We don't think about it. I think the idea before was that people think that natural resources are infinite and that they cannot finish. But of course, we have been proved wrong now that they are finishing, and we have to do something about it if we don't want to continue to face the consequences.
We've been joined by Mr. Ola Oresoya, who is Commissioner for the Environment of Ogun State. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Oresoya. Can you hear me, Mr. Oresoya?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great.
Can you hear?
Great, we can hear you clearly. Now, we signed the Paris, we're part of the Paris Agreement, Mr. Oresoya. How much have we adhered to it? And how far along are we in the agreements made by nations regarding climate change?
All right. Well, when it comes to the Paris Agreement, I think we signed on to certain conditions. That's the nationally determined goals that we signed on, which is a 20% reduction. That's an unconditional reduction in the carbon emission that we have and the carbon footage. That means that we need to reduce the quantity of carbon we emit into the air with all our activities. So we will sign on to that. And there's about 47% conditional determined goal that if we have a support, the global support, we're going to reduce our emission by 47% by year 2030. Well, these are grammar anyway, but then these are details. These are to set standard for what we're to do and to set our agenda for us. Now, what are we doing basically in achieving this? The basic things we need to do, we'll look at the areas, the activities that generate the most the carbon emission. Talking about the extractive in our gas flaring in the Niger Delta, we look at the extractive industry, the cement industry. These are main areas where we generate so much of our carbon footage, and that where we are signed on to making sure that gas flaring will stop everything by 2030. There will no more be gas flaring in Nigeria gradually, and the mileage is taken every time. Now, the extractive industry are looking into alternative energy so that they use less of fossil fuel, and that will determine that they will go down. And those two industries mainly will take us quickly to the 20% unconditional targets. Now, we have other areas like waste management and several other activities where we generate so much methane into the air. And these are areas we need to look into. So what is Nigeria doing basically is looking into the adaptation measures, whereby there are some activities that we cannot do anything about. We need to adapt. We need to have a new methods, new ways of doing them, and doing them very well. And the Federal Ministry of Environment is working seriously with sub-regional government that are really ready to do this. And we are really working in that direction. It's a slow process, really, but yeah, something is going on with some sub-regional government. I may not talk for all the other sub-regional government, but I think the national government is working with states that are really ready to move in this direction. and there are a lot of intervention in this direction.
Mr. Arasa, my question was, how much are we adhering to those agreements? You said 20% reduction in carbon emissions. How many percent have we done now, so we can begin to gauge if we're moving rapidly towards the goal or we're not moving at all?
Yes, we are moving. One thing is clear. What you can measure, you can manage. So the first thing is to determine the baselines. What is the quantity we are generating now? Now, most of the industries have done their baselines. All right. So annually, there's a report. When you go for all these conference of parties, which is what's going on in Cairo right now in Egypt, you have to give account of, yes, as of last year, you are at this percentage. This year, you are this percentage. At the most of the private sector, the main manufacturers, yes, it's going on. They've calibrated their own thing. Now, within the government side, the public sector, it's still not really perfect. Most cities don't still have their carbon footage. Only very few cities have their carbon footage. I can talk of Lagos. Lagos have their carbon footage, and annually, the reduction in carbon footage in Lagos is going on. Ogun State is already calculating its own baseline, and I'm sure that will be completed by the end of December. We're working with Federal Ministry of Environment, and I think there's one or two other state governments that are really determining their own baseline. And let me tell you the critical areas where this will happen. In your waste management, you must have a waste management efficiency, okay? Then that's the critical area where the public sector must come in. Then you must reduce the rate at which you use generator in public offices. Public offices, you must reduce energy conservation. So how much of less of energy you're able to use in public offices, hospitals, and the rest of it. Then the building that you design, how much of energy efficiency do you have embedded in those buildings? These are critical areas, these are critical measures that you look at cities and you're able to reduce. Annually, you calculate this in your transportation. For example, BRT. The BRT is one of the critical areas to reduce the number of the downfalls you have on the road emitting these gases every day. So once you're able to have a mass transit, the mass transit will reduce your carbon emission footage, and these are critical areas of interventions.
Well, it's interesting that you put it that way and telling the private sector to cut down on the energy consumption through generators. Essentially perhaps saying they should stop producing. And that's the way it sounds, because what alternative did they have for now? But let me go to Mr. Olubamiche. We understand that Nigeria just set up a climate council to try to take on some of the issues we have to contend with as far as climate change is concerned in the country. Drilling down that conversation to people where we know that government is doing something. President attends this COP meetings from time to time. But drilling down to the people, for the people to take ownership of it. You saw the clips we shared earlier, and you were happy that those things are our reality. Government is only to govern. It is the people that do the living in the various communities all over the country. So the things that the people have to deal with in terms of how climate change affects them, affects the people directly. How the people act, what they need to do in order not to get the raw end of the climate stick, that's on them. Getting that information to the people seems like a tall order. Mr. Oresen was talking about the subnationals and what they're doing and all of that, but it is the subnationals that have to intervene first when these climate change crises, if I can use the term, hits. How do we begin to conscientize the people about climate change when the whole conversation sounds very elitist to them?
Thank you very much again. And let me start from my experience, personal experience of what I do. We work with local communities to address environmental issues, including climate change. And when I get to the communities, what I ask them is that the trees that you have, if they still have trees standing, I would say, are these the number of trees you have like 20 years ago? And they say, no, we have built houses, we have built this, we have done that. So and I asked them, do you think that these trees were doing anything for you when you just didn't think twice and just cut them down? And they're like, well, at least we used to even sit under the trees to shade us from the sun. Then I start to explain to them that the process of your cutting the trees, what I explained before is that the trees are no longer there to absorb the carbon dioxide. And then the second thing is that the heat that you are now having to deal with, because the trees are no longer there, before you could just run under a tree and take a shade from the sun, which is not the case again. So these are the kind of awareness we are creating. I asked them, the animals that you used to see before, do you still see them again? Can you show them to your children now? They said no, that either we have eaten them or they have run away, because their habitats, where the animals live, they have been destroyed, and we have built houses and roads on them. So I believe that creating awareness onto, like you said, nitty-gritty of what we do. How do we use water in our houses? Mr. Resoya was talking about generator. Of course, I mean, it's funny that if you ask hospitals or companies to stop using generators, then of course you're asking them to stop production. So what is government doing to create an enabling environment for people in the house not to use generator? If there is light, constant electricity, people will not be, and nobody would say, I don't want electricity from the government, I want to be using my generator. It's not done. So these are let people know that personally, how do you use water? How do you use materials in the houses where you are using, even right from your kitchen? What are you doing to the waste that you're generating from your kitchen? Many of these things, we call them waste because we think that they're not useful to us again at that particular time. But now knowledge is increasing. We know that many of this raw waste, food waste that we used to throw away, many of them now can be converted to compost. People are doing gardens at their backyard now, growing their own vegetables. Two things, major things. Number one, some of the foods we buy in the market, they are grown with chemicals, preservatives that are causing all manner of health issues. So that is one thing you are preventing when you plant, you have your garden at your backyard. And then again, you have your fresh fruits or vegetables to get for yourselves. And then I can bet you, anybody that has affinity with nature, there is something about them that is always different, because it is how God has created it. And when we go back to nature, make friends with nature, then of course it creates a kind of an ambience for everybody, for the people who are involved in it. And so you have gardens at your backyard, you have your own vegetables that is not grown with chemicals, and then you have them at your beck and call anytime you need them. These are some of the things that individuals can do. And then we can create awareness of our footprints. When you want to go you want to travel or you want to go somewhere, are you thinking of joining resources together rather than each person? Each time I am driving alone, I always think, this car can take at least four more people. Why can't I share this car with somebody else so that we will reduce the number of fuels, for example, that we will consume to office in the morning and back in the afternoon? If we can think of all these things, the issue is that when we don't sit down and think about it, we think the problem is so insurmountable from individuals' perspective. But when we sit down and think about it, I bet you there are so many things individuals can do to address this thing, at least within your own environment, before we now talk of the government's aspect of addressing climate change. So individually, I think there are so many things we could do.
Mr. Resoya, an important part of this climate change and the raison d'etre for these conferences is reduction of carbon emissions. Do you think that the Nigerian government is doing enough to tell the people and create awareness for the reason why we need to reduce our carbon emissions?
Well, thank you very much. the awareness side, yeah, may not be adequate. I don't think it's adequate. All right, because just like just been said by the fellow from Abuja there. I'm sorry, I missed your name. I think there are a lot of low-hanging issues that can be done by the people, and yes, and I think we need to relate more with the NGOs to really do this education and awareness. It is, I will agree with you, it's not enough, and even within the government circle, you'll be surprised that there's so many people in government who don't really have a good understanding of this. Okay, so there's this just so much you can tell people in government to take a decision. Some people see that they works until when they start relating with the problem, then they don't listen. The moment there's a relief, nobody listens again. And in Nigeria, one of the critical areas where we listen is when there is flood. That's when we remember there is climate change. When we have flood, we suddenly remember there's climate change, and we start listening then. After the flood right now, nobody listens again, okay? So, but like I said earlier too, within government itself, we have to do a lot of education, and there has to be a lot of commitment, both from the private sector and the government sector itself. What the real mega problem, okay, I can tell you, the gas flaring in the Delta, if only we can curb that, we will have gone halfway through in our carbon emission targets. The gas that will flare, and this gas right now is being encouraged for bottling so that we can have this cooking gas. We can reduce the tree felling, and then apart from that, we can also do more renewable energy, make people go off the grid so that the national electricity grid, so that we can reduce those footage. The more we reduce that one, the more we hit our target. And this is a global contribution. And Nigerians sign on to this, and we need to do it. So, just like you said, I don't think we are doing enough in this, and this has to really, we have to really do more in this area. And I think the media too need to support in this campaign for climate change activities.
Well, Mr. Oresanya, I'll stick with you for a bit. You spoke about the subnationals the other time. It seems there's a lot more work for the subnationals than we're even giving attention to. I say that against the backdrop of the fact that first you are, in government in the subnational, and what you just admitted to us now, that most government officials are not aware, is not really surprising, but it is disappointing. Is because no matter how many COP meetings the president attends with whoever he goes with, unless those conversations get back home and to the subnationals, to the states, for them to take their bit and perform it, then we probably haven't even started at all. So in terms of conscientizing the subnationals, what do we need to do to get that done?
All right, I think the first thing is we need to have a culture of preserving institutional knowledge. We don't really cherish institutional knowledge in this part of the world, okay? And the moment somebody probably will have started an idea, a good one, the moment he leaves the office, the knowledge lives with him. So we need to start preserving institutional knowledge and drive from there. Okay, we need to build a sequence from this knowledge preservation, and so that whatever we have done 3, 4, 5 years ago, the fellow left, we don't need to start reinventing the wheel. This has been making us to run what I call a dynamic inactivity. By the time you have new people, they want to come and start from where the other fellow started 10 years ago. What we have done 10, 20 years ago, we're still trying to repeat it because we are not preserving the knowledge. So we need to think with them. We need to rejig our governance structure to make sure that we cherish institutional knowledge. And I think the media needs to help in this area also by looking into archives, what you've seen before. By the time a new government is start repeating 20 years ago, okay, why are you repeating the same thing? Go back into your archive. We need to preserve knowledge. Now, and I think, yeah, like you said, subnationals. Yes, subnationals are the real responders. We're the real responders at the national level. You galvanize the direction, you create the policies, but subnationals have to be empowered with knowledge to respond, knowledge and infrastructures. Okay, so you need to have a capacity at the subnational develop. They need to understand. At many of the subnational, they think they don't understand the whole idea of this climate change. We are still paying lip service. So we don't see more than the normal government project, normal government job. It's really, really more than that. We need to own it. We need to be convinced about it, and we need to do a lot of education in this direction. I must really agree with you.
Well, okay, so let me ask Mrs. Olubamiche. So this is where we are now. We have a challenge with communicating to the people, and what are the implications of this this gap, if we can say it that way? What are the implications for us as a people, and what must we do now if we are going to get ahead of it? Because unless the people know what to do, just as you said, and especially at such catalyzing levels as the subnationals, the states, and the regions, the flooding we just had will probably be just a piece of cake compared to the implications of what could happen if we don't get ahead of it. So in terms of what the subnationals need to do and what the people themselves need to do at the local levels, where do we start? In the absence of adequate communication from governments.
Okay, I will. Thank you again. Yeah, I'll talk from also what I do. And I think it is important. Mr. Oreso, mentioned about the non-governmental organizations. I think a couple of them, many of them are doing fantastically well as far as communicating environmental issues to the communities is concerned. And we have worked with a couple of them. We've worked with over 130 NGOs in Nigeria. What we are after is just go and communicate these issues to the communities, because we can't always all wait for the government. And what we have found out also is that when these communities, for example, accept the message that we are sending and we are sharing with them, the results of whatever activities or whatever initiative they have taken can also help the government to make decisions. So it is important for us for the government to identify the roles of NGOs, and enhance the roles of NGOs who are going to these communities to communicate environmental issues, climate change, climate smart agriculture, adaptation, mitigation, and all sorts to the communities. It is important. You even find out that some of these communities, they actually are feeling what is happening. They know what is happening, but how to go about it, to do anything worthwhile about it, is their issue. So when they understand it better, most of the time when we even get to the communities, they are the one that we even profile solution of what they think they should do. We may even be thinking, no, it is this one, and they will say, no, based on their experience, based on what they have seen and what they have handled, they want it this way. And then, of course, we discover that, yes, this is what is happening. So the NGOs need to be enhanced. They need to be supported by the government, because they're actually one very big avenue of creating more awareness to the communities and to individuals as far as this environmental issues and climate change is concerned.
Mr. Olubamiche, it seems Nigeria, we have a set of amazing plans. For instance, we have what some people say is one of the best nationality-determined contribution. That's the plan that states how government intends to reduce greenhouse emission. We have that's a nationally determined contribution. We have the energy transition plan, which, of course, the Vice President has marketed all over the world. We also have the Climate Change Act, and we've just also been informed that we have a climate council to implement some of these things. So it would seem like government is doing a lot. But actioning them, taking them into action, what kind of partnerships need to be in place in order for this to happen?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. To get these government efforts to the communities or to the individuals, I think, like I mentioned, the NGOs are doing a lot. And then one of the things that has happened and we have discovered is also that when some of these policies are being developed, the people who are supposed to, are the receiving end of these policies, most of the time they are not carried along. We have meetings in Abuja, we have meetings in the very beautiful places, and these communities who are going to be the one that will actually implement some of these things or know about some of these things so that they can do something about it, they are not invited for these meetings. And then we're doing policies, and either we don't invite them, or even when the policies have been developed, government needs to find a way to divulge this information to the communities and to the sub-regional levels.
Just one second, madam. Just 1 second.
Okay.
It's instructive, the things that you have said, that when these things are being evolved, the NGOs who will be part of the execution agents, so to speak, are not they're not at the table, they're not at the meeting rooms. But the question that I'm asking, perhaps you have begun to answer it partly. What kind of partnerships have to happen? That's the question. In order for these plans, these laws, and all of that to make sense to the people and have effect as intended. But when, as you say, the NGOs, critical NGOs, are not at the table, it will seem like the partnerships are already combusted. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the NGOs is like we have three different sets of groups. We have the government, we have the NGOs, and we have the communities. If the governments make policies and the NGOs, I want to say that it is not that government is not involving NGOs to some extent, but I think that Nigeria is so big that you can have a national policy and you have just a couple of NGOs at the meeting to put in, making contributions to it. So we have the government has to, number one, create an environment. I remember there was a time that we fought for this at the National Council on Environment, whereby we said that every meeting, every of the National Council on Environment, the NGOs must be part of it, not just to come and attend the meeting, but also to be part of the decisions that are being taken. Let them bring their memos, let them bring their issues to the table, and then we'll facilitate the participation of NGOs in these things. And so the policies, the NGOs understand them better because they are part of the policies that are being developed. And then when they go to the community, it is easier for them to be able to communicate what the government is trying to do or the information the government is trying to pass on to them and their responsibility as the case may be. But I tell you, it is also important if the government will look at it, that even the communities, the head of the communities can be part of these meetings. Because when they come and they understand what government is talking about, it's easy for them to go back to their communities and to be able to share this information with their subjects. And I think this is one of the ways that governments, NGOs, and the communities need to come together at the table to be able to work together and understand themselves so that we can have a common purpose on how we will address any particular issue that we're discussing.
All right. Mr. Oresoya, I don't know what your take is on what Ms. Olubamishi has said, especially about partnerships that have to happen if the plans of government, the nationally determined contribution, the Energy Transition Plan, the Climate Change Act, Climate Council, and all of that, are to work effectively for the people as intended. Mr. Oresoya, can you hear me? Oh dear. We understand that he's no longer on the line. That's it.
Okay. Mrs. Olubamishi, the Minister for the Environment has says that at this year's COP meeting that Nigeria is going to walk the talk. Can you please interpret that for us?
Well, okay, thank you very much. One of the major issues about this COP is climate justice. In as much as Nigeria, government, the people have their own responsibilities to, as far as climate issues are concerned, we also, I mean, it's getting clearer to the developing countries, for example, now, that climate justice is another way that we can get the whole world to do something about climate issues. You discover that yes, even it's not a license for us to continue business as usual. But even the gas that we are flaring in Nigeria, if you quantify the percentage of it with regards to what the developed countries are emitting in terms of their carbon footprint, it is just very minute. But that doesn't mean that we in Nigeria should not do something about it. So what the developing countries are fighting for, in quotes now, at the at the COP27 is climate justice. That look, unfortunately also, it is the developing countries that are not contributing so much to climate issues that are at the receiving end of climate issues. So it makes it to be lopsided. And this is why all the promises that the global world, the international community has made with regards to climate change and helping developing, because what they are telling us is that keep your forest intact. Don't destroy your forest, because definitely we know that the environment does not have boundary. So whatever, if you keep your forest intact here, and then of course it affects the whole world eventually. Now the developing countries are saying they also want to develop, and you're telling us to keep our forest intact. So where is the balance? So it is about climate justice that the developing countries are taking to the meeting in Egypt, and they're saying, okay, we are ready to do this. We want to do our own. We want to take the responsibility that concerns us, and we're ready to do it. Hopefully that the government will continue to make efforts to help and to ensure that Nigeria meets our own targets and our own promises. At the same time, the global community also, are we just coming to the table to discuss, and after all, what happens? There were so many promises that have been made, so many even financial supports that have been made, that have been promised, and the developing countries are not getting it. So one thing about we want to walk the talk is that we are ready to take our own responsibilities, but is the global community also ready to walk the talk that they have said as far as these climate issues are concerned?
Well, climate justice, I've added that to my lexicon as well today. But let me ask Mr. Oresanya Justice 1, and then we can close this segment. I was trying to ask you the other time about the partnerships that need to happen for all of the initiatives of government to make sense and fructify exactly the way it's intended. The Energy Transition Plan, Nationally Determined Contribution, Climate Change Act, Climate Council, the whole works. What partnerships must happen if they're all to make sense?
Well, thank you very much. I think
Go ahead, we can hear you. Oh dear. Well, I guess it's about time to call it a day then, because...
okay. So,
okay, can you hear me now?
all right. Okay, I'm back.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I go on?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Yes, I'm sorry, the signal has been behaving funny.
Yeah.
I think what the kind of partnership we require really will stand basically in information dissemination. The NGOs and yes, they're supposed to represent the voice of the people, and there's not just the NGOs alone now. The CDAs and the CDs, the community-based associations and community-based organizations, we need to engage them. There should be more engagement at the CDC, CDA level, and to train them on adaptation programs, adaptations, and talking about reducing the carbon footprint and making sure that they understand what it means. And apart from that, we need to let them see the educational, the economic benefit of doing this thing. If they cannot relate the whole idea of climate change to economic benefit, then there's no incentive to do it. So there must be an incentive that would drive this when you're talking with the CDAs, when you're talking with the people. What do they stand to gain? Why, if I stop using generator at the black pass my neighbor, and I can use the solar panels, the solar lamps, and reduce my cost of energy. We need to be able to reduce this to naira and kobo for them. Then they will relate with it. So there's a skill in information dissemination, and this must come from the NGOs. Most of the NGOs have to be trained in how to relate this. The point of contact with the people is in economic benefit. We must be able to relate it to them.
That makes perfect sense, Mr. Oresanya. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And all we can do now is to wish you good luck when you all set off to Cairo for COP27. Mrs. Ronke Olubamishi, National Coordinator, Global Environment Facility Small Grant Program, as well as Mr. Oresanya, who is Commissioner for the Environment, Ogun State. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us about climate change and COP27. Sunrise will return in just a moment, and we'll be looking at wellness.
Stress and wellness. You know, we say health and wellness, right?
Stress
and wellness.
Okay. See you in just a moment.
Well, let's just say we switch gear this week with the home stretch, right? Stress and wellness. It used to be health. Well, it is health and wellness actually, but hey, stress and wellness.
Because there's good stress. Shebi?
They say.
No. They say there's good stress. Because I thought, how can stress be wellness? You can't be well and be stressed. But I was corrected by those.
You haven't even heard the half of it, not even the 10th of it.
Okay.
Oh yes.
Okay.
They say stress is part of life.
And they say that stress is good. You know, all those things I can't really understand. But we go ask them.
So let's just get into it. Our guest this morning is Chris Ero, who is team lead at the Wellness Boss, which is a wellness consultancy service, a trained holistic wellness coach with the International Association of Wellness Practitioners, and a member of Life Coaches Association of Nigeria. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you dare tell us?
I was listening to the debate.
You dare tell us that stress is good?
Yeah, I double dare.
I gives up.
Please explain yourself. One, because what you hear is, don't stress me.
Exactly.
Don't give me stress.
Stress. If stress were such a good thing,
I would take
why
it.
are people always saying, don't stress me, don't give me stress?
You know, it's a perception that we have built with stress over the years. You know, we've linked stress with everything negative. You know, I keep telling people that if you do not build a beautiful relationship with something, it's going to work against you. And then when you think about it, it becomes synonymous with the negative.
Build a beautiful relationship with stress.
Yes, you can.
You
know why?
The way she's talking like that, Alero, the way she's talking, it sounds like you're building the one white halo over stress.
I'm saying.
You know, the thing is, as humans generally, the natural inclination for us is not to take responsibility for actions, is to blame something else, or something else has to be responsible for what it is that we're going through. So we're not seeing that the role that we play in it is as crucial as the environment within which we find ourselves. Now, let's start from the very beginning. What is stress? Stress is basically our response to stimuli, internal or external, right? And it basically means when demand exceeds supply. So you get to a position, yes, you get to a position of stress. Now, when I say building a relationship with it is, it's
please
part
say
of
it better.
life.
Building a relationship with stress, right? That's what you say.
Yeah.
Say it yourself. Don't quote me.
No, but you have to, because if you don't, the perception that you have regarding stress would actually come back and negate every other thing that you're doing regarding stress. Stress is a unique gift that we have not been able to really gain the benefit of because of the perception that we have that it's negative. Now, what stress is our defender. Stress is our protector. Stress warns us. Stress keeps us safe. That is the intent of stress. So when I tell people that things like stress reduction is a myth, right? It's something that you keep chasing and you never get there because it's something you can never reduce. There are different types of stress that you're going to experience.
Okay, wait. Today, go understand this matter. What are the signs of stress? When someone is stressed, okay, when people say, I'm stressed, what are the things that you would expect the person is feeling?
So it depends on the individual. There are different responses to stress. Now, for me, a sign of stress could be sweating, or it could be a sudden urge to go to the bathroom, or it could be an itch, that I need to, scratch, or it could be butterflies in my tummy. For some people, it could be a headache. Now, when it gets to the point where it begins to affect you, that means you have allowed cortisol to remain for far too long within your system.
Please, calm down. You are taking this thing too far.
I'm trying to make it as simple as I can.
Which one? How cortisol enter this matter now?
Yeah, because when you're stressed, the hormone that actually indicates that you're stressed is cortisol. So it released in your system.
Now, there's some things you said, and I would like for people to follow the conversation.
Yes.
You began by saying stress is not all bad.
Stress is not bad.
Not bad at all.
Yes. We are the ones that determine when it's bad. We make it bad.
How do we do that?
Now, when you don't understand stress, when you don't understand the reason and the purpose for your stress, and when you do not understand your reaction to the stress, you find that it's difficult for you to read the signs or the signals that stress is giving you. That's where I was going to, where I was talking about is your protector and your defender. What stress basically does is gives you signals to tell you when to run or when to stay and fight. For a lot of us, we mix up the information. So when we're supposed to run, we are not running, we are staying to fight. But at that point, that is not what we need to do. And there are times that you need to actually stay and fight, but we are not, we are running away. So it's that whole mix. Then what the message you're not sending to your body, to your brain, is that you're still in that stressful position. So you're still in that stressful position, more cortisol is released. And the more cortisol is released, the more it begins to affect you. Then it becomes...
Affect the health.
Yes, it becomes negative, it becomes chronic stress.
Chris, take a child. She's just done her SSE.
Okay.
And she's going for her results.
Okay.
She's apprehensive. Could that be described as a stress situation?
When you're apprehensive about something, you have anxiety. Yes, it is.
Okay, so she's going to receive her results. And that's bad stress, right? Or is it good stress?
It's just stress.
It's just stress?
Yes.
Okay. She gets the result and she has failed. And she's heading back home to go and present that rubbish to mom and dad. Where is she at that point?
She's stressed. Now, when she allows...
We're not describing the kind of stress yet.
She is just stressed.
Okay.
At that point, she's thinking of, how do I pass this information to my parents? How do I let my parents know this is what has happened, right? Now, there are two ways that she can do that. She can either decide to break down, and she goes into a depressive mode. At that point, she's releasing more cortisol. She's gotten to that point where she's depressed. It has gotten chronic because of her response and her reaction to the stress. But in another way, she can look at it like, okay, well, I failed, but doesn't make me that. So I can go to my parents and explain to my parents, this is what happened. It actually builds resilience in the child. So she then knows, okay, yeah, I mean, it doesn't define me. And then she takes responsibility for the role that she played in it. Instead of victimizing herself and making herself feel like a failure, you know. So that's why I tell people that a lot of people who you see are successful, right? Those ones inadvertently understand the code to stress. And that is mastering it.
Okay. You will teach us to
master stress.
Yes. So you will teach us to master it in this scenario. Maybe she gave you that of an SSC student. Take a single mother who is working, has a job, has a difficult boss, underpaid, lives far from home, overworked, underpaid, has to go to work at so time to meet a difficult boss, and the landlord is calling.
Okay, now I'm trying to... All these scenarios, one human being.
One human being.
All these scenarios, one human being. And hey, that's probably just a start for someone. In the village, their house has just been flooded.
Washed away.
Okay, you know, all these things don't happen in isolation. There's actually a process. Something leads to something. So what you need to do in that situation, if you want to help her master her stress, is basically ask her very fundamental questions. This job you're doing, do you need the job, number one? Do you have another skill that you can work on? Now, if you do need the job and your boss is a chronic boss, like a toxic boss, right? You have to be able to position your mind in a way that, okay, you're there for the work, you're there for the income. You're not there for your boss. You cannot control what your boss does to you. You cannot control what your boss says to you. But you can control how you react to your boss. We've had people who are in the same scenario, but they respond differently. And that's because of the nurturing they've given themselves over the years. Some have been able to build that resilience. I mean, they really, they don't care. You can say anything you want. I'm focused on what it is I'm doing here. So when you're at that focused, you are not thinking about people victimizing you or blaming you, or you're not thinking about that. Your whole mentality is more productive that way. And it's more productive. You're thinking more of solutions. You're not thinking of excuses. You're not thinking of problems. So when the solutions do come, you are more clear-minded. More clear-minded, then you know how best to because I can't remember all the other scenarios you mentioned. You said she's a single mom, and then so many other things, and then the flooding as well, right, in the village. One thing we tell people is we worry over things we have no business worrying over. That's one of the issues that we have. I had to learn it the hard way myself. We worry over things we have absolutely no business worrying over. As in, you have to be able to determine what do you have control over. If you can deal with it, then why worry? Just deal with it. If you can't deal with it, still, why worry? Let it be. You know, we have to get ourselves to the point where we understand that life is life. Things are going to get thrown at you, but you need to be able to build yourself up from within.
Now, in terms of building yourself from within, how do people get out of that melee? That's one of the challenges that people have to. For instance, I mean, you talked about the signs of stress the other time. You talked about yours. There are those who have changes in their body, tense muscles, rapid breathing, heart rate, which is going cardio. You mentioned that when we spoke yesterday. Headaches, difficulty sleeping, fatigue, changes in sex drive, affects the marriage, affects other relationships and all of that. Someone is, maybe the person is supposed to be at 0. Now the person is at, the average is 0. The person ought to be at a 10. The person is at a -10. how does that person work herself back from -10 all the way back to 0 before starting to think about getting up to 10?
Positive.
Okay, one of the things that we do is apply the 3-step formula to stress mastery, and I usually like to add a 4th step. So the 3-step formula, you have to learn to assess. You assess your situation, assess the contribution, the role that you play in it, and then you look at how it affects you. You're assessing it. Then appreciation is the 2nd step. And appreciation, you see, okay, what have I gained from this? What is it teaching me? Because whether it's good or bad, every experience that you go through teaches you something. So what stress mastery actually does is help you to be in the present and really understand what is going on instead of being reactionary. You know, a lot of us are very reactionary. Something just happens, we just blow up emotionally, and then we're, doing stuff like that. So by the time you appreciate what the stress is doing in your life, and you look at it on a 360 degrees position viewpoint, where you look at everything, the good and the bad, and then after that you then adjust. You adjust yourself accordingly to the things that you have learned in your assessment and your appreciation. And by the time you adjust, you then assimilate. You now let it become a part of you. And I'm going to break it down. I want to use the example that she gave, the girl who messed up in her exams, right? So by the time she starts to assess it, okay, why am I stressed about my exams? What did I do? Did I read when I ought to have read? All right, then why am I reacting to it the way I'm reacting to it? Is it because of my parents? Do my parents think that I am not worthy of being a daughter if I do not pass my exams? Or do I think I myself am not worthy? Right? So that's just an example. And then I want to appreciate. Now, what is this situation teaching me? What is it telling me? What are the things I could have done? And then I look at it, I'm going, instead of reading two times a week, maybe I should have read 10 times a week. Maybe I should have, or maybe, you break it down. And then when the time you now want to adjust, you then adjust yourself accordingly. If you could only make out 5 hours a day for studying, you find out, why was it 5 hours? What else can I shift to make more time for me so that I can adjust my study time, so that I can do better in the next exams? Then by the time you do the adjustment, you begin to assimilate it to the point that it becomes a habit, it becomes part of you. You then find that it's just second nature for you to just get up and do what you need to do.
Now, you've talked about what the person can handle, the space that the individual can control. But you would also agree with me that a lot of the pressure comes from external forces, the environment. You talked about the parents. In the event that the parent says, look, if you don't pass, this is going to happen, or that is going to happen, or if you don't give me this report within such regulated time, I'm not going to sign your annual performance and evaluation report, and consequently you could be demoted at the office, or your salary removed, or you could be sacked from work. All of that pressure, and sometimes these things happen in torrents.
Yeah, they do.
So people can't even have time to adjust, to appreciate, or to assess and all of those things. There, while one is happening, you are trying to adjust to it, another one is coming altogether. So how do you prepare? Because it sounds like you have to anticipate
but you do.
that some of these things are going to happen. So how do you adjust to a difficult situation and anticipate worse at the same time?
Just by focusing on yourself. Again, it's the same thing. Your father has given you an ultimatum. Then you determine, how am I going to approach that ultimatum? Sometimes what we do is, we already know that a situation is going to happen, but we don't prepare for it. Wait for it to happen, and then it overwhelms us. All right? So we are saying that even in life, even in the things you do not know are coming, right, you have to prepare yourself for the eventuality of it all, because life in itself is uncertain. And that's why I talk about stress reduction is a myth, because if you're talking about stress reduction, what stress are you reducing? I don't know if you get what I'm saying. We just talked about the uncertainty of it all. What stress are you reducing? For some people, it's stressful for them to be caught in traffic. For some people, being here on this stage right now is extremely stressful.
Some people even get panic attacks in traffic.
Exactly. For some, thinking about what to eat in the morning is extremely stressful. Now, for some, there are other kinds of stress that would come their way that they would not even know would come their way. So what we are saying is we are not taking the stress in single bits. We are saying stress is going to come, life is stressful. But then you can determine how stress deals
with you
just by how you relate with it, and it's your mindset.
Are people aware? Because I mean, you mentioned some complications that could come as a result of stress that is not well managed.
Yeah. You know, the thing, and that's the issue, right? They say the beautiful thing about life is change. But not everybody is welcome to change. It's a scary concept for a lot of people. And for a long time, we have been so used to the terminology stress management, right? Hey, I'm taking a stress management class. We're having a stress management facilitation. And that in itself, not that it's wrong, but it's wrong in the sense that it is based on the wrong notion of stress, that stress is bad. When you see something as bad, when you see something as negative, you don't want it in your life. Sure. You're going to try everything possible to get rid of it. You're going to try everything possible to avoid it. And in the process of doing that, what happens, especially when you see it not being avoided, when you see that it's not reducing, you become more anxious, you become more frustrated, and the stress increases. And then you find that you continually keep doing these stress management techniques, but you're seeing no results. But on the other hand, what stress mastery is saying is you are not the victim. You are actually the one in charge. Stress is a tool if you understand it, if you know how to use it. Stress is a tool for you that you can use for your benefit, to thrive actually. So when we see people, I know it's a difficult concept because we are not used to it.
It's like saying malaria is a tool.
When I stumbled on stress mastery, it opened my eyes. Because I came from a situation where I had a health, I don't know if you remember, I had a health issue, right? And I went into a coma, I had amnesia for 2 years. So when I came out of it and I was like doing a look back into my life, trying to remember or trying to understand what brought me here, I realized that my lifestyle was whacked. It was up and down. So stress was a pivotal aspect of my life then. And I tried hard because I didn't want to go back to that situation. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to focus on stress. I'm going to manage my stress. So I was doing a lot of studying on stress management. I was doing these techniques. I was learning so many tools, but there was no difference. I found that I was constantly, the thing I thought I was dealing with was actually exploding in my very...
Dealing with you?
Yeah, it was dealing with me. Thank you, you know. So I was worried, and then it caused me to study more. What am I not doing right? What am I doing wrong? And then I stumbled on this lady, Dr. Heidi Hanna, and she's one of the front runners of stress mastery. And then I studied what it is that she's doing, and I was like, yes, this is it. This is the secret that we've all been chasing that we didn't know we were chasing. Because we've been looking at stress as bad, we've been painting ourselves as victims. So stress that's supposed to help you, that's supposed to lift you up, protect you, defend you, keep you safe, and keep you healthy in your mind and in your body, we are rejecting it. So it's like we're in a constant battle with stress. Stress is trying to help you, but you're fighting it, and stress is wondering, why are you doing this? But with stress mastery, stress now realizes that, this person understands why I'm here. This person is using me rightly, and then this person is actually using the stress rightly because the person has built himself, developed himself to understand the signs of stress and why he reacts that way and what the stress does to him in the process.
So how do people begin to take this? Because you see, weak immune system is a reality for people who are not, as you said, mastering, stress. People who are stressed, chronic stress and all of those things. By the way, are there different types of stress?
Oh yeah, chronic stress is when you have allowed stress to fester for too long, that it becomes bad. We say that anything good, when you abuse it, works against you. That's the same thing with stress. That's just it. So it gets to that position, and by the time it gets to that position, it's actually your body has been trying to warn you, giving you signals. You know, there's something we say, if you don't respect stress, stress humbles you.
Okay, so
you know, it brings you down so that you begin to take charge and take note of your body and, you know, take care of it better.
what are the initial steps people need to take to master stress?
Understand self. You have to know yourself and understand yourself. Who are you? You know, who are you really? It sounds like a cliche. It sounds like something that people would just
I'm a
say.
businessman chasing money.
No, we're not.
And if I don't get the money or get the contract, there's going to be a problem.
No, but outside all that, is that really you? When you are alone in your thoughts, who are you? What controls you? What makes you successful? What makes you idle? You get? So by the time you think about that,
yeah. The reason I'm you know, saying that, because perhaps also is the environment. You know, I spoke about the influence of the environment the other time. We can't take anyone away from the environment, can we?
No, you can't.
Perhaps that's where the challenge is, because people are always going to find themselves in stressful environments. How do you separate yourself from an environment that you can't separate yourself from?
You know, there's something we say about, especially with this current rage of the Japa movement, you know, where we tell people that if you're a lizard in Nigeria, you can't be an alligator wherever you're going.
Well, not with genetic mutilation.
You know what I mean? Because it's your mindset that drives everything that you do. People who are driven by a certain code of conduct, regardless of wherever they find themselves, they would stay true to themselves. But people who are not sure or certain of who they are, you find those are the ones that are always seeking validation elsewhere. They really don't know what they want, you know, so they are not able to set boundaries for themselves. So anything goes, really. So those are the ones that are easily taken advantage of. Those are the ones that give up easily. Those are the ones that go like, hey, I can't do this. Those are the ones that see themselves as, and when we're talking about giving up and seeing yourself as a failure, it's not necessarily about doing well in business or doing well in, because you can fail in those things. People do fail in those things. You can fail in your marriage, you can fail in your business, you can fail in school. But then, are those the things that make you? Because we say that failure does not define you, it is how you get up that defines you. So that is what we're looking at. We've already accepted that failure is part of life. But what then happens when you do fail? Are you the one that when you fail, you crawl up on your bed and you shut...
And have a pity party?
Do you get? Or are you the one that sees it as, ooh, this is another opportunity for me to try it another way? You see the difference?
Get up and go.
Exactly.
Okay.
Get up and go.
At least ja. You know, those critical questions perhaps need to be asked by the individuals themselves, because unless those questions are asked, I mean, we're only beating around the bush, so, you know, as to say.
So really, each person reacts differently to stress.
Exactly.
So when you say what might be good stress to you might be bad stress to me, what might be good to me might be bad for you, depending on how I react. The two of us can be in the same situation now. You will react one way, I will react another. That's what we're saying, isn't it?
Yes. And again,
it all depends on who you are.
On who you are. And I like what I want to bring what he said regarding environment and your nurturing. Let's take it back to childhood. One of the things we try to tell parents now is try to teach your kids life coping skills so that they are more resilient when they get older, right? So you have a child, or you have two kids who were brought up in fairly influential homes, right? And then maybe the two of them now get stuck in a terrible financial situation. You find that one is unable to cope, cannot imagine himself without money. He's never been without money. So without money, he's nothing. His life is nothing. But the other person was brought up in a way to see money as a tool, not as a definer of life. So the money is not there. It doesn't really bother because she already is secured.
Life goes on.
Exactly. So in that situation, the stress is not in itself bad. But because of the other person's reaction, exactly, that makes it bad.
Well, again,
it's making sense.
Say this is another conversation starter. Why do we always have conversation starters? Chris Zero, team lead, the wellness boss, wellness consultancy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
this illumination this morning. Now, thank you, Lord, for telling us there's a difference between stress mastery and stress management.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm going to have to...
Now we're going to have to say goodbye, and we'll bring you a fresh edition next week. I'm Alera Edu, wishing you a very happy weekend, and it is good to be back.
Amaya Makinde, thank you for bringing her back, all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.